Sam, so I follow you on Twitter. Sam Antar. Sam, so I follow you on Twitter. You're a forensic accountant. You told me just before during the break that you say you're a convicted felon. You've had your own issues with the law, right?
Yes, and I learned both sides of the law.
Exactly.
I learned every trick of the book from when I was a criminal, and I learned every trick in the book after I stopped being a criminal.
So I was following you on X, on Twitter, and I saw you started posting about Letitia James and all these mortgage fraud allegations and all of the documents that you're pulling up. This is what any other person could get. When you started peeling back the onion and realizing, oh my goodness, I can't believe that our Attorney General is doing exactly what she accused President Trump of doing and tried to put him behind bars for doing, that she's guilty of it as well. What was going through your mind and how did it all start?
Well, first of all, I didn't target her.
I know, yeah.
I've been writing about New York City finances and politicians for quite a while, and I ventured onto her. She was just another name on the list. But what I saw was really magnifying red flags I didn't see anywhere else. And that made me look into her deeply. She was spending exorbitantly on her campaigns. She even used private jets on the government's dime. That overlapped periods when she was campaign events. And of course, we have the issues of her financial disclosures to New York State and her mortgage situation. But one thing about Abby Lowell, she should get a better lawyer. He's really not that bright. I read his letter to the State Department. It was full of innuendo, and let's put it this way: if Abby Lowell was defending me, I wouldn't be here. I'd still be in prison. Ooh. 35 years later.
Oh, wow.
What's going on, everybody? Thank you all for joining me today. If you haven't already, please make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new to the channel, and most importantly, please make sure that you are following me on Telegram at TD Media Group to help circumvent social media censorship and shadow banning. And with the introduction out of the way, let's get into today's news. And today we are headed back to New York once again. Why? To discuss Miss Letitia James, aka Big Tish, aka the Queen of New York, the Teflon Adonis who can do whatever she wants when she wants. At least, like I said in the past, I gotta give it to her until that federal indictment drop, which I do believe it will. The federal indictment will come. These things do take time, so everybody, just relax a little bit and don't get discouraged. You don't want to haphazardly come out with a federal indictment just for things to fall apart and you look really bad like you were just witch hunting. Okay, but until then, I'm going to keep exposing this woman for the fraud that she is. And now what has just been released is this bombshell video evidence that is continuing to prove Letitia James as a liar concerning her Brooklyn unit or Brooklyn property that she claimed had 4 units when it indeed had 5 units, right? And she did all of this essentially for financial gain, okay? Look at this article here. Big news by Joel Gilbert on the Letitia files. My visit to Letitia James' apartment building confirms mortgage fraud allegations. Shout out to Joel Gilbert. He's been working closely with Sam Antar. They're essentially kind of a tag team duo that have been doing a phenomenal job at exposing Letitia James. Sam Antar has gotten the most attention out of the two, but Joel Gilbert definitely deserves his respect and his flowers and a round of applause for the work that he does along with Sam Antar, right? So I want to get into this here because, like I said, we have the video evidence now. We already seen the certificate of occupancy. And that certificate of occupancy was originally from, I believe, if I remember correctly, January of 2001. And Letitia James moved into that property, or I should say purchased that property in around February of 2001, either February or March of 2001, right? The certificate of occupancy from 2001 clearly states that property was a 5-unit, though year after year after year, Letitia James classifies it as a 4-unit building. Then we all know, as you all remember, as we see here, The electric meters expose the truth about Letitia James' property. I'm not going to read this article because we've gone through it already. But I mean, as you can see here, the physical evidence, 6 electric meters don't lie. A third floor rear unit meter, a common area service meter, a basement unit meter, first floor unit meter, second floor unit meter, and a third floor unit meter. And if you want to, have a little grace and say, okay, well, a common area that doesn't count, so strike that from the record. Well, that still means that she has 5 units because there are 5 separate electrical meters. That's for each unit. But outside of that now, let's get into the actual video evidence. That's what I want to do next. We're going to go through this article here very quickly, and that's where we're going to be led is to the actual video. And once again, big shout out to Joel Gilbert for releasing this and doing all the work behind it, right? So let's get into this article here, and it reads as such. Over the past 6 weeks, I have detailed the evidence of mortgage fraud by New York attorney Letitia James in my series, The Letitia Files, on the Gateway Pundit. Meanwhile, forensic accountant Sam Antar has published damning mortgage fraud information in regard to Letitia James on his website, White Collar Fraud. This past week, Sam and I decided to visit the crime scene. I like how he labeled that there. I want to read that again. This past week, Sam and I decided to visit the crime scene, the apartment building owned by James since 2001. Sam and I set out to document 2 central issues: the number of apartment units and the number of floors in James's building. Now let's get into what they actually found when they got there. I'm going to pivot to the video next, and let's jump into this now.
Here we go.
Sometimes you got to go to the scene of the crime.
And there it is, 296. So I'm going to walk up to the door. You want to come? Joel Gilbert here at 296 Lafayette Avenue, scene of the crime with Sam Antar. Four units plus the basement is 5.
Now, this here is very important, what he's doing right now. I don't want to say too much because I'm going to break it down in detail a little bit later via the article that Joel Gilbert released, right? But this is extremely important and very damning, what he's getting ready to reveal here.
87 inches.
87 inches. Measure it below grade.
87 inches.
Okay, measure it below grade.
$16 16. So clearly the basement unit is above ground. It counts as a floor. This is a 4-story building and not a 3-story. Okay, I'm here with the great Sam Antar at Letitia James' 4-story apartment building that she falsely claimed as 3-story. We've just proven it by measuring 87 inches above ground for the bottom floor, only 16 inches below ground. That counts as a story, meaning it's 4 stories. Letitia falsely claimed it was only a 3-story building. Also, we've got the Certificate of Occupancy right here that clearly says that it is a 5-unit building. There are 4 units listed on the bell, which I got a photo of, and Sam has a photo, and there's 1 more basement unit, which is the 5th unit. Letitia James has been a serial.
And did you see that right there? Look at this. You can clearly see, and this is labeled out and highlighted in the article as well, in case someone wants to say the basement unit isn't a unit. There's a doorbell right here. There's literally a mailbox and a doorbell that you can see, the white doorbell on the door for the basement unit. So that's 5 units. 3B, 1 unit, 3A, 1 unit. Second floor, 1 unit. First floor, 1 unit. That's 4 units. The basement with the doorbell and the mailbox makes 5 units. I mean, the video evidence is damning. there really isn't anything else to talk about. I could shut the video down here, honestly, but let's keep it going. So now let's come back to the main article here as it pertains to the basement unit and the significance and importance of this, right? In New York City, a building with a basement apartment and 3 additional floors above is considered a 4-story building for the purposes of HPD registration. To qualify as a story, a basement unit must have at least half of its height above the ground level. If the building's lowest level meets the definition of a basement, especially if it has an apartment, it must be counted as a story. Misclassifying a basement unit to underestimate, or I should say to understate the number of stories is a registration violation and can lead to potential penalties. I measured the height from the sidewalk to the top of the floor of the basement apartment at 87 inches. Then I measured the distance from the sidewalk level to the bottom of the single step that led to the door of the basement apartment at only 16 inches. In sum, the ground floor basement apartment was roughly 82% above ground, unmistakably more than 50% above ground needed to qualify as a story. In fact, the certificate of occupancy for James's building lists a cellar as well under the basement unit, further indicating that James's basement apartment unit is a story and cannot possibly be considered a cellar. This woman has been caught dead to rights. Not just with electrical meters, not just with certificate of occupancy paperwork, but with actual video, physical evidence as well. And this is now officially documented. I mean, what more is there really left to say in terms of whether or not the woman's guilty or innocent? Now, obviously, she has to go to court and have her day in court, her due process, as Democrats love to shout that word out a lot now. But it's very clear and obvious to me, in my opinion, that this woman is just beyond guilty and is a fraudster. She's 100% a fraudster. I want to come back up top a little bit, though, to read this portion of the article here in the middle, because I do think that this is very important, right? Oftentimes we discuss how much more money Letitia James would have to spend on updating this property if she was actually classifying it properly. But in this article, it does a really good job at laying out the kind of upgrades that she would need to make that goes to show why she's avoiding classifying this property as a 5 unit versus her classifying it as a 4 unit, right? So let's get into this right now. And the article reads as such. In obtaining loans and refinancing for her building, James has constantly claimed only 4 apartment units. This claim contrasts the official certificate of occupancy, which states it is a 5-unit building, as we all know. In New York City, property owners are legally required to register all details of their resident building. In New York City, property owners are legally required to register all details of their residential buildings each year with the Department of Housing, Prevention, and Development. On Letitia James' registration page of her apartment building, she has consistently listed her apartment building as having only 3 stories. There is an incentive for James to lie, falsely registering a building with HPD as having 3 stories instead of 4 stories and 4 apartment units instead of 5 units offers a property owner potential financial and regulatory advantages. Now, here's where things get interesting as it pertains to her having regulatory advantages by misclassifying this property that she has in Brooklyn, right? One advantage is avoiding the stricter legal and safety requirements that apply to larger buildings. In New York City, once a residential building reaches 4 stories or 5 units, it can become subject to additional regulations under the Housing Maintenance Code, Building Code, and sometimes the Multiple Dwelling Law. These regulations could include mandates to create fire escapes that cost money, add sprinklers that cost even more money, install accessibility upgrades under ADA guidelines that's going to cost you even more money, and require more frequent inspections by HPD. Now, why do I have that highlighted in blue? Well, we all remember this story here, right? You all remember here with the story that broke about the tenant's complaint within 48 hours of the criminal referral going out, and the tenants were complaining about peeling paint in their unit, that in their units that were not being covered or weren't being taken care of by Letitia James. Apartment 1 and apartment 2B both filed complaints, right, of peeling paint. In apartment 2B, as many of you all remember, they complained about peeling paint in their living room, and in apartment 1, they complained about peeling paint in the entire apartment, right? And as you all remember, at the time when we reported on this, HPD wasn't given access to get into the building. They weren't able to inspect it at the time. Well, since then, to be fair, right, they have been able to inspect it, and the status is now closed, right? So as you can see here, this is the official, NYC HPD online. As you can see here, you see status for both now are no longer open. They're both closed. And if you click on the arrow, which gives like a little drop down menu, as you can see here, it reads, the Department of Housing Prevention and Development inspected the following conditions. No violations were issued. The complaint has been closed. I wanted to make sure to follow up on this and give an update, because I know that bad faith actors will try to look at this if you don't get out ahead of it first and make mention of this and say, oh, well, this was all a witch hunt and none of this means anything because no violations were issued. Just because a violation wasn't issued doesn't mean that she wasn't told you need to paint these walls so you don't get a violation, right? Clearly, when you have an entire apartment unit that has peeling paint, let alone another unit that has peeling paint all in their living room, clearly there's neglect going on. And clearly they haven't been able to reach out to Letitia James or her property manager directly in order to get this resolved. So it took for them to file an official complaint with HPD just for this to get resolved. And when you take that official complaint on top of all of the negative and bad press that's surrounding Letitia James now, because we're all talking about this, we're all highlighting this. Before the status of these two claims were closed, they were open, and I was on here talking about this last week. What's going on with the peeling paint? Why isn't she keeping up with the maintenance? The heat is on Letitia James. So now there's a fire lit in her to have to actually get this stuff done. I'm willing to bet you now that apartment 1 and apartment 2B have fresh paint jobs. I'm willing to bet you now. But would that have been the case had the heat not come down on Letitia James? That's the real question, right? That is indeed the real question. So now let's come back over here to round things out as we bring this video to a close. These regulations could include mandate. Oh, I read that already, right? But let's come back over here. Require more frequent inspections. And that's also, I'm sure, something that she wants to avoid, as having more frequent inspections, right? Because then that all comes down to having to spend more money when they issue you violations or issue you warnings. Excuse me, and get this, or even require elevator installations. Now that's big money right there. A building that once did not have an elevator, and you own this property, and now they tell you, yeah, you need to install an elevator in this apartment complex. That would be huge. But that's the kind of money to have to get that done that'll make you sell your property. You'll just say, you know what, I'm just better off selling this property off. I'm not going to spend the kind of money to install elevators in here, right? Depending on the building size and configuration. In addition to the regulatory burdens, the larger size might lead to higher insurance premiums. Complying with these requirements can involve significant financial investment. Indeed, another powerful incentive for a building owner to understate the building's specifications. Once again, In between, let's just say, right, she has to install a fire escape now. She has to add sprinklers. She has to install accessibility upgrades, right? We're talking about for people in wheelchairs. She's going to have more frequent inspections, which can lead to more violations and more money you have to spend on upgrades. Having to, God forbid, install an elevator in her apartment complex, depending on the actual size of the apartment. I mean, man, once again, you're probably better off just selling the unit at that point. You're probably better off getting rid of it because of the amount of money that it's going to cost you to upgrade. I mean, who knows how long it would take for her to actually make that kind of money back. And once again, we're talking about New York City, okay? We know this stuff isn't cheap. It's not cheap at all. So with all the evidence laid out, once again, man, it's pretty clear to me that this woman is guilty, in my opinion. I assume. But what do you guys think, man? After seeing the video evidence out now and everything being laid out, is it case closed? Is she guilty? Has she been caught dead to right being a fraudster? You let me know in the comment section below. With all that being said, that does it for today's news. So thank you all for joining me today. Please hit the like button on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you're new to the channel. Share this video on your social media platforms. And also do not forget to follow me on Telegram. The link to my Telegram is in the description box below and in the comment section as well. Thank you all for your time. Until the next video, peace and have a great afternoon.